So I want to introduce you to this guy right here. His name is Jason Yates. And until very recently, he was the CEO of a group called My Faith Votes. Okay. And what is My Faith Votes? It is a nonprofit organization that their goal, I'm going to share this with you. This is their website. It's a nonpartisan group that motivates, equips, and activates Christians in America to vote in every election, transforming our communities and influencing our nation with biblical truth. And actually, if you go down on their website, look at what they say about why we exist. Secular progressives have actively sought to implement a counterfeit worldview at every level of government. Christians have remained quietly inside the walls of the church, which is BS. When have Christians ever been quiet about anything? I don't know. As a result of apathy at the voting booth and in public life, we've suffered devastating moral decay, declining religious freedom, immoral national debt, and the erosion of traditional family values. And that is why they support the guy who's had 3 different wives and 5 kids with them and would balloon the national debt and is nothing but a walking example of moral decay. But again, the idea here is they're blaming secular progressives for everything wrong with the world. And they're saying we're suffering moral decay and traditional family values have been lost because too many people like atheists have been in charge of everything, which is news to me because we are not in charge of anything. That group's honorary chairman is Mike Huckabee. So, I mean, this is the sort of group this dude, Jason Yates, was running. And this past summer, I'm going to show you this as well. This is in the conservative Washington Times. But there was an interesting article. This is a conservative news outlet. But our children are being programmed to believe sexually deviant behavior. And let's look at this right here. He tells a story. You could see his name there in the byline by Jason Yates and My Faith Votes. He said this past July, he was talking about his son Levi, who's in middle school and part of a robotics team. And they went to the University of Minnesota for a robotics competition. Fine, good for him, all that's fine. But then look at this. As we walked into the arena at the University of Minnesota, we were greeted by something far different from what you would expect. We were immediately confronted with posters encouraging children to embrace strange new sexual horizons. They were handing out literature with an agenda to teach him to doubt the link between his mind and body, his self and his self-image. They offered Levi a rainbow button to wear, encouraging him to declare his gender preferences. Wasn't this supposed to be a robotics competition? What the hell is this guy mad about? I don't know if this had anything to do with the robotics competition or because it was held at the University of Minnesota, there were college students who were just handing out, rainbow buttons or like name tags that might have said, tell us what your pronouns are or something like that. And this guy is treating that as they're trying to get my kid to embrace strange new sexual horizons and they're trying to confuse him. Like, dude, if you don't want the button, throw it away like the rest of us do and move on with your life. But this is the sort of dude Jason Yates is. He's the sort of person who flips out over the sight of a rainbow flag because that's apparently bad for children, right? He sees Pride merch and he flips out and he thinks gay people are trying to recruit my son because these people are still weird, even if Tim Walz is no longer running for anything. Anyway, anytime Christians try to pretend their morality and their religion are linked together and that anyone outside that Venn diagram is inherently immoral, you all know how the story turns out, right? You know where I'm going with this, yes? You know what happened to Jason Yates, because I promise you, whatever you think just happened to Jason Yates, it is so much worse than whatever you were thinking. I'm gonna pull up something from a website called Ministry Watch, which focuses on this sort of stuff. But here is the headline. I'll just read it to you straight. It's disturbing. Jason C. Yates, the former CEO of My Faith Votes, has been charged with 8 felony counts of possession of that phrase I'm not going to say because I don't want YouTube to be mad at me. Each of the 8 charges filed in McLeod County, Minnesota, carry a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison and a fine of $10,000. That means this guy faces 80 years behind bars right now. They note that Yates has a prior conviction and is a registered predatory offender. So, not only has this guy been arrested for possession of stuff he definitely should not have, this is apparently not the first time he's been convicted of this stuff. He is already a registered predatory child sex offender. This is how is this the first time we're learning about this? That's very disturbing, right? And so that prior conviction also had to do with the same sort of material, but according to news reports, that prior conviction was tossed out for reasons I could not figure out. That's why it was unreported, really. But in any case, if you look at the court records, and this is what like these websites are posting, there are court records of what happened to this guy. It's really disturbing because this is what the law enforcement officials basically told the judge, like, we need to arrest this guy. And I mean, I'm not going to read all of this because it's just troubling, but just look at the charge. Count 1, possession of adult material involving minors under 14. And they have count after count of stuff like this that's just more and more disturbing. This is where the 8 counts are coming from. These are all separate incidents. And then they get into like why we think it's this guy. And I'm not going to read all that. That's a bit of word salad. But the story that the court documents revealed are actually devastating. Here's my best attempt at summarizing what happened here. Some relative was in Jason Yates's home office and they needed a way to store some files. So they were looking around for like a flash drive or something, and they came across a portable hard drive in Yates's dresser. So they plugged it into their own computer, and when they were looking through it to see if there was storage available, they realized there are 100 sexually explicit images of children. Very disturbing. So this person's like, oh my God, I wasn't supposed to see that. What the hell do I do? This person calls up a trusted friend, and the friend's like, you need to turn that over to law enforcement. And that's what happened. The hard drive was turned over to law enforcement. And in this court document, it goes into detail about what the hard drive had on it. And listen, I read some of the descriptions in the legal document. I'm traumatized. I'm doubly traumatized from this week, and I was already not doing well. I think the most disturbing thing I learned from those documents and those descriptions is that the victims were allegedly between the ages of 5 and 7. That is something they mention repeatedly because they go into depth about what the videos, the pictures were. Very disturbing. So his next court date's going to be in January. And until then, this guy is forbidden from having any contact with anyone under the age of 18. He's just not allowed to be around them at all. I also wonder, when I was reading that Washington Times article he wrote about his kids' robotics competition, there was this nugget of information that I found pretty disturbing. Let me share this with you. This is in his bio at the bottom of the article. Jason serves on several national mission boards, coaches his daughter's lacrosse team, and is an elder at his church. This guy coaches a girls' lacrosse team. I'm scared to ask the follow-up question. So when Religion News Service, oh, by the way, I got to show you this. I went to go find that same article I just showed you about the robotics competition, and I went to the original URL for the Washington Times where I saw the article the first time. This is what it says now. Editor's note. This content has been removed. And let's look at the editor's note. The Washington Times has removed the content of this article after the author's arrest on 8 counts of possession of that material. Like, really? Why are you removing it? Why? Did you not? I don't know why they had to remove it. He wasn't talking about that stuff directly. I think they're just ashamed to be associated with this guy, right? I also wanted to share with you, this is, I wanted to pull this up. The Religion News Service, they actually reached out to My Faith Votes to ask about this dude. And this is the statement they got. Like, hey, what's up with your CEO and his arrest? In early August 2024, the My Faith Votes board of directors separated Jason Yates from My Faith Votes, and board member someone else assumed the position of acting CEO. And notice how quickly they pivot here. Over the last 3 months, Chris has been working with a dedicated My Faith Votes team to encourage millions of Christians to vote, pray, and think biblically about this election in America, so we can all vote for another sex predator in the name of Jesus. They did not say that. But it is weird that they're just like, haha, why are you asking us about that dude? We separated from that guy a month ago for no reason. Did we not do any background checks? Did no one have any clue this was going on? That's weird. I feel like if this was an atheist organization where the director was charged with these awful crimes and the organization responded like, well, I don't know why you're talking to us. We got rid of him 3 weeks ago. So whatever, don't be mad at us. I feel like Christians would make a bigger deal of it. But anyway, they had nothing to say. The organization had nothing to say about how they treat secular progressives as moral degenerates. Meanwhile, they were run by a guy who was hoarding illicit content involving children. No statement about the hypocrisy that you have to believe to allow that to happen. By the way, they also pointed out in the Religion News Service article that on the Monday of Yates's hearing in court this week, My Faith Votes held an online pre-election prayer event, urging listeners to vote for candidates who support Christian values, which I would think either means Kamala Harris or nobody, because nobody's perfect. But no, somehow that meant supporting the least Christian dude in the world. The guy who just goes against every single thing pastors love to say Jesus taught. They were praying for that guy while their former CEO was in court for the worst reasons. Like, at what point will any of these groups reckon with the fact that the biggest threats to children are often in positions of power within religious organizations? Like, I'm not worried about drag queens reading books to kids in libraries. I'm worried about the youth group director who got his job without any sort of vetting or background checks, and he's doing whatever the hell he wants to do with those kids. That's what we should be worried about. That's what they should be worried about. But they don't care. Now that they've been caught, they just want the story to go away. They're not going to wrestle with any of the facts of the case. Okay, I'm done with that story. Disturbing stuff. What questions we got here? I'm sadly not even surprised about sexual assault from religious leaders any longer. I know my podcast co-host pointed out, like, she'll sometimes send me stories about people like this doing awful things, getting arrested for these reasons. And I told her at one point, hey, I can't cover this. There are dozens of these stories every week. And by and large, I kind of have to put them aside unless I think it's a bigger story or there's a bigger picture, bigger conversation to be had about it. I can't cover every priest who does something criminal. There are just too many of them. So yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by the depth of the crime. I fully expect it to happen. And I think people who attend churches, their default should be that I am not going to trust the religious leaders in charge here. They have to earn my trust. And until they do that, I'm not going to give it to them, because there are just too many stories of people behaving badly when they have access to children because they are considered people of faith. What other questions we got? My kid just said, if that's what you call moral, I'll gladly be an amoral heathen. Nice job, kid. You are someone who's probably voting like an atheist, which I was told by the Florida lieutenant governor was a very, very horrible thing. Oh, thanks, Gabby. I'm an atheist, but for me to be okay with describing myself as that, I need to know that my time and effort are not used in an us versus them fight, which is really hard to do if you feel like you are one of us, but is important. Just trying to parse that, I I am, like you're saying, you are an atheist, but if you want to be proud of that label, if you want to use that in any meaningful way, I will just tell you that the atheist organizations I tend to support personally and just communicate with on a regular basis, they are very much, even American atheists, which you would think is carrying the flag for the atheist label, they're very much not like an us versus them fight. They will ally with religious groups as long as we're working for church state separation. I have actually seen, and for good reason, we are not fighting against religious groups. I'm sure there are individuals who are like, burn it all to the ground. Like, I'm sure there are some subreddits where they would do that. But by and large, a lot of the atheist organizations, a lot of the people you might see on YouTube who are atheists with a large following, their enemies, so to speak, are not people of religious faith. Those people are wrong. We could discuss why they're wrong, but they're not the enemy. The question is, who are people doing evil things because of their beliefs? I'm going to put my focus on them. And if religious people who dislike that want to ally with me to push back against it, just like we saw with Evangelicals for Harris during this campaign season, great, let's work together because we share this goal. And later on, when we're having drinks together, we can argue about religion. So I don't think there was a lot of us versus them fighting going on, especially in terms of the organized atheist movement, which is a small group, but it exists. But also, even personally, a lot of the atheists I know who do YouTube and podcasting and everything, it's really not a we're right, everyone else is wrong, screw them all. We think we're right. But again, it doesn't mean you have to treat everyone else like the enemy. So, my 2 cents. Should also mention that the us versus them paradigm is beloved by folks who have no friends because they suck. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing I didn't like about the Trump campaign and the people supporting him, where they just treated everyone who's not them as the enemy. Whether it was their jokes or just their rhetoric, it's like, if you're not with us, we have to destroy you. And that's why, I mean, it's so disturbing that they were able to get away with that. Thank you for that, Julia. I appreciate it. Any other questions or thoughts here? You should sell Vote Like an Atheist merch. I was about to say, like, I'm pretty sure now is the worst time to sell Vote Like an Atheist merch. But yeah, we should all consider that, like, before the next midterms.